How to tell if he's ready for commitment. I want you to all look for this. Well, listen, I'm really excited today because I have one of the, I think the very first online dating coach that ever got started in this business, Marc Katz. We've known each other professionally for years. We've become better friends more recently. I'm excited to have him on. So welcome, Evan.
Jonathan, thank you so much for having me. It's genuinely a pleasure to be here today.
Well, you know what? This is actually a treat for me because I want this to be more of a conversation to help people improve their love life. And you and I operate kind of differently, but kind of the same. So I thought, let's see how we view things. And, before we get into men and commitment, I'm curious to ask you something. Since you've been doing this for 22, I believe, 23 years, how are things different now with dating coaching versus back when you got started? Dating, or even date, or let me make that, how is dating different?
Yeah, I mean, the big change to dating, of course, is dating apps and texting, which didn't exist when I wrote my first book in 2003. It was old school Match.com with the written profile and the email. And there was some semblance of courtship, even though everybody was kind of like a kid in a candy store. There was still some process you had to go through. And so I think that's one of the huge ways that things have changed for the worse, is that is ubiquitous. And the most common form of communication is now texting. And texting is very different than the phone conversations that I was having in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so then dating coaching, well, when I started, again, there wasn't anybody else who did it. It was me and David Wygant.
Oh my gosh.
Right. R.I.P. But David Wygant and I would have lunch every year. We were like the only two dating coaches, and we'd sort of compare notes. And now the truth is there are thousands of dating and relationship coaches and thousands of dating and relationship podcasts and influencers. And so the more people helping people, the merrier. But it's been very, very diluted, where the thing that you used to say that was original, now there's a million photocopies of things that I thought that I said back 20 years ago that are coming out of other people's mouths. So if the world is a more aware place, I'm grateful for that.
Well, it's interesting because going back to when I think the first time I went online dating for myself, I went through a divorce in 2005. There was AOL Personals, Yahoo Personals, and then Match.com, which kind of bought them all out. And I remember back then you'd have to write an email. There was a little bit more robustness to the profile. Compared to today, I just feel like dating, particularly online dating, is so marginalized. The way swiping has made people, it's almost devalued people. And I wonder if you're experiencing the same thing from your end.
Right. So yeah, we're an instant gratification society. People have no attention spans, and we've been taught that content is free and should be consumed in small bits. And we're not better for it because everybody feels like a piece of meat. Everybody feels like they're not really getting a fair shake, and we don't really have a chance to differentiate ourselves. It really becomes a case of who are the most physically attractive people. They're going to suck up most of the attention, and then everybody else is kind of fighting for scraps. And so it's not a meritocracy. It doesn't make people feel good. And by the way, and everybody's kind of figured that out.
Yeah.
It's not even saying anything bad about dating apps, because they're a tool that people still have to use them. But I think the pendulum is swinging to the point where everybody recognizes this isn't working. How do we do something that's a little bit more personal, a little bit more connected?
Well, I want to argue a point, though, and I'm curious to hear how you feel about this. You said, I believe you said people have figured it out. I look at dating profiles every day, and I would say that 97% of them are so poorly created. I mean, so it's kind of my philosophy is garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. If you're putting a poor representation of yourself, then why are you shocked when you aren't getting the results you're looking for?
Two answers to that. And I acknowledge your point, but two rejoinders. Number one, it's the medium more than anything. if I'm given the real estate where I have 3 sentences to write about myself instead of what I used to do, I still do for people on Match.com, write 200-word essays about me, about who I'm looking for. The real estate means it's very, very limited, and people are going to revert back to what they did back in Match.com JDate days.
Okay.
And they'd still write lists of adjectives, lists of activities and hobbies and cliches. That's how people express themselves. And so one of the things, the second point I want to make is, I'm a coach, you're a coach, we've worked with lots of people over the years. One of the things that I know, having held people's hand, and again, I'm assuming you have the same experience, is there's a lot of really great people out there who are shit at marketing themselves. And they're my clients. So would it stand to reason if there's a woman who works with me who says nice, smart, kind, warm, funny, hiking, biking, movies, music, travel, right? It's sincere. She didn't misspell anything, but it's not much of a profile for you to hang your hat on. That there's an equivalent guy out there who's got a thoroughly mediocre profile, who's a gem of a human being. The medium's not really serving us.
Well, part of I'm curious to hear if you believe the same as I do. I think to some degree, humans have a propensity to gaslight themselves to think they put a good profile together. In other words, there's almost this delusion, and I don't like to characterize it exactly that way, but there's this, oh, it's good enough, without a real understanding that. And let me just finish this thought. I am still a huge believer that online dating is one of the best tools to reach people you wouldn't otherwise reach in your daily life. So I know people scoff, and I'm sure you hear it all the time. They're jaded on online dating, but still the best game in town.
I'm a believer in online dating because real life, I mean, for all the people who say they hate online dating, and I think everybody watching could raise their hand and say it, every client I've ever had who's like, Evan, you're going to make me date online? I'll tell you what, you don't have to date online at all.
Yeah.
Really? All you have to do is get yourself 1 date a week. And if you get 1 date a week without online dating, you never have to date online. No one's ever taken me up on the offer because real life does not produce enough opportunities. It just doesn't. And so real life is great, but you don't go to a salsa class to meet a man. You go to a salsa class because you want to learn to salsa dance.
Yeah.
Like, you can't generate enough real life interactions. If you're of a certain age and your friends are married and you live in the suburbs, you better figure out how to leverage this medium. And so the medium is highly flawed, but there are ways to differentiate yourself in how you market yourself online. And, you know, there are people who are skilled in helping you do that to stand out from a crowd, because the sites themselves really don't give you much to work with. I still recommend old school online dating. I still recommend Match.com to people. And the facts show that 50% of people over the age of 50 are finding that Match.com is a better platform for them. It's not a dead platform. There are more people on Hinge and Bumble volume-wise, but it's old school online dating is not entirely dead.
No, and as you know, actually, you're not aware of this, but I'm actually seeing someone right now. So I'm actually off the market. But a month ago, I was on the market, and I used Match, Bumble, Hinge, Millionaire Match, The League, Facebook dating.
So can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because what you're doing again is the comprehensive approach, and I appreciate the comprehensive approach. Yeah. But my question is, how many sites do you have to be on? Couldn't you just be on one, like belonging to one gym instead of 5 gyms? How many gyms do you need?
I look at it a little bit different. I look at them as all spokes in the wheel. And now I happen to have enough bandwidth where I can allocate 30 minutes a day to the various sites. I mean, and I'd be lying if I didn't say I'm sitting on the toilet swiping. So I multitask sometimes.
Thanks for the visual.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to be real here for a second. But no, but because in my world, my mindset is hey, the person I'm looking for might be on this site or they might be on this site. You know, not everybody is in one portal. So
Right.
that's why I don't, but again, I have the bandwidth to spread myself out.
Yeah.
And maybe because I'm a male and men tend to do the hunting more, maybe it's a different methodology
you know, and I do. People tend to just bounce around from site to site to site. Like people say, "What's the best site?" And it's like it doesn't literally.
They're all the best site.
Yeah, everybody lends anywhere looking for the best site. So anyway, yeah. Again, I'll follow your lead on what you want to talk about.
But where I wanted to go with this is like, and really, I wanted to lean into the state of affairs. Really, the state of online dating is really where I wanted to lean into, and then we'll get into men in commitment in a minute. Because I still believe that this is going to be, it is the number one place people are meeting, in the sense that over 65% of couples today are meeting online. And I actually just see that number growing. And I'm just curious if you sense the same thing.
Well, again, it's one of those things where you don't even have to like it to just recognize its importance. Like, take any technological advance. You know, at one time there's one dude with the iPhone, and then everybody, you know, in every country's got an iPhone. And then there's the new streaming thing called Netflix, where I used to get the actual DVDs mailed to me. And at least streaming becomes ubiquitous. And so you can't deny the rise of dating apps. The question is, how do you utilize them in such a way that it's not too time consuming, too soul sucking? How do you use it better, instead of just saying, I'm deleting them, I'm done? Once again, dating depends on opportunity. And as a dating coach, again, I don't know enough about how you coach your programs. One of the things that I think is really important for people who hire dating coaches is that you have to date. It can't just be therapy. We just can't talk about your past. We actually have to try new things. And so dating coaching means that there's going to be dating. And if you are not getting any dates and real life doesn't lead you to any dates, we have to figure this piece of things out. But there is a marketing piece of it. And most people, left to their own devices, don't land on it. And it's not because they're not intelligent. It's that we all have kind of blinders on.
Yeah.
And may I volunteer one thing, just because it's here, and I think it's a high value thing?
Yeah.
If most people, as I said, lists, adjectives, hobbies, throw those all out. Not because they're not true. It's just because if everybody's doing it, it can't be particularly interesting if everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
So then you start to think, if we were to take the top 5 adjectives you would use to describe yourself, like, let's start there. Why don't we do it with you? What are the top 5 words you use to describe yourself?
Well, I'm going to be bold and say I'm emotionally mature.
Okay.
I'm curious. I can be chill or laid back.
Great. We'll start there.
Yeah.
So then, if you're marketing yourself on a dating profile, and those are all great qualities, you'd come up with an example of how that quality benefits the woman who's reading it.
Yeah.
So you give the example I'm chill. If we missed our flight at the airport, right, I would make sure we get another flight and befriend the bartender for the next 6 hours at LAX.
Then I need to retract. I'm not chill. I'm actually an anxious person in those environments.
Now, the point is, we're assigning a story.
Yeah.
Right. It's writers. Writers know this. Show, don't tell. So if you are emotionally intelligent, your anecdote would be an example of how you handle a situation differently than another guy might handle the same situation. And the story becomes your unique differentiator. I give examples of my wife is intelligent. She's not intelligent because she graduated summa cum laude with a minor in math. She's intelligent because she made me a color-coded Excel spreadsheet to help me prepare for a fantasy football draft. She's intelligent because she explains the plot of A Midsummer Night's Dream to me because I can't follow Shakespeare. So you give the example, and now you have something in your Bumble profile that no one in the world has. It's only your story.
Yeah.
So to me, you're marketing to the consumer. If a man's reading your profile, demonstrate what he gets out of dating you, not the adjective, the story.
And by the way, for everyone listening, I've got a link to Evan's website. I want you to know that he also has a website called eCyrano, where it's actually a profile writing site. So I definitely want you to check it out, because most of us aren't writers and may not have this skill set. But Evan already has a company to help you write a better profile.
You're very sweet, and I'm just going to say E-Cyrano, and we don't write dating app profiles. There's no point in hiring a professional writer to write you 3 sentences. I'm telling you how to do it right now. We will write you the 200-word essays, and you could take it. But in general, we're not trying to market to people who need 3 sentences written. You are fully capable of that.
So really quickly, we're going to shift gears and talk about men and commitment, but I just want to share with you the opening line to mymatch.com profile says, yes. And I quote, "Imagine we just walked out of a personal development workshop, self-help or personal development, self-help or spiritual workshop, and we can't wait to share what we learned and all the ahas." That's how I started my profile. So it encompasses.
I get it. Now you're evoking a feeling, and it's pretty specific, and it's going to draw in the right kind of person who speaks that language.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, let's talk about men and commitment, because I would say that that's probably the #1 question that comes across my desk, are, centered around men being commitment phobic. And I'd love to hear, when you hear that come across your desk, what's your reaction to that?
I think there's a really complicated answer. Yeah. So I'll just throw out a few things. #1, after divorce, and again, I like to cite studies, so it's not just me talking.
Yeah.
Women initiate 2/3 of divorces.
Yeah.
Right. And it's true. A lot of men are terrible husbands. So women initiate 2/3 of divorces. After the divorce, who's more likely to want to get remarried, men or women?
Well, I still believe it's women, not men.
It's men. It's men. 2/3 of men want to get remarried. Less than 50% of women want to get remarried. Why? Because they associate marriage with their terrible husband.
Yeah, no, that part I agree. But I'm not to argue. I've just observed men, if they felt like they got screwed financially in the divorce, they are less likely to get remarried for that reason, is why I thought that.
No, that's a piece of it. And again, we could look at this through multiple lenses. I just remember being struck by this statistic that it was like 66% of men want to get remarried after divorce, and only 45% of women want to get remarried after divorce. And it's not surprising. The women are the ones who are initiating the divorces. They're down on marriage. The guy would have stayed married.
Yeah.
So a lot of women are really, really down on marriage. But then you ask them, what would you like to see happen? And you ask them the life that they want to have. It sounds a lot like a marriage. So there's a lot of women who claim, I never want to get remarried. But deep in their heart, if I were the marriage fairy, they would love if I just went zzz, and sent them a husband to love them and take care of them forever. So are men commitment phobic? I think that when anybody's been burned by love, it's going to impact the way you do things down the road.
Yeah.
But I think there's a reason that people keep coming back to it. We could talk about it all day long about how people are commitment phobic. Look at the marriage. There's millions and millions of people who get remarried multiple times because they've not learned anything from the previous experience. Yeah. So my take on men are commitment phobic is more of this. Yes, that exists. I'm not denying the existence of it.
Yeah.
Commitment phobic, avoidant attachment, the whole thing. But it's more pointed to say, I bet you're more attracted to emotionally unavailable men. So that's who you think the sea of men is I choose commitment phobic men, and therefore I see them as such. And there's a whole bunch of guys who are like, hey, I would love to have a partner. And you're like, no, not into you.
Yeah. No, and I'm in full agreement. And I think you and I'm going to parse something.
Sure.
I know that you originally began talking about having a broken picker, and that's kind of what we're describing here. And then when a mutual friend of ours, Melanie Benson Strick, told me, hey, start talking about broken picker, I recognize that what you're really describing in many cases where women are bypassing really good men for those men who aren't a good opportunity for them. And I'm assuming you see the same thing in your practice.
Again, it's not a matter of like victim blaming. There are women who are genuinely victims of mistreatment, but usually, and again, not a psychologist, don't claim any special knowledge, but usually if you're raised in an environment where your father's emotionally unavailable, or he abandoned you, or he was really critical of your mother, there's a dynamic that you saw of how men are and how couples are that was imprinted upon you as this is normal. This is what love looks like. And then you go out into the real world and you create situations that look like, and all you're doing is recreating something that was dysfunctional to begin with, because you've never really been around healthy and normal and what we call secure attachment style. So I think a lot of people don't even have a chance, and they don't even realize this. There's an entire other lane where people have really happy, healthy, normal, non-roller coaster, stable relationships. And so it's easy to say men don't want to commit. I think if we even grant that's true, the power that you have is not saying I give up on love because men don't want to commit. It's how do I retrain myself to value guys who are consistent and kind. And I'm thinking very specifically of you right now. And when we first met and you were dating someone that you brought to my house, and how you were just like white on rice. You were just like, there's no questioning your desire, your commitment. And that's how certain guys are when they're into you. It's not a game. It's not a dance. There's no posturing. It's really authentic. And if you allow those men into your heart, you can have a happy relationship. If you pull away every time someone's nice to you and you overvalue guys who aren't, well, that's your dating pool.
By the way, I want to talk about that relationship for a second, but before we do, folks, I just want to take a break here to say, if you have a question, there's a little chat box in the corner. Write the word question and post the question thereafter for either Evan and I, or you can purchase a super sticker, super chat. There's a little $sign in the chat box. All the monies from the super sticker, super chat goes to a scholarship fund in the name of my son, Connor Asley. That's a picture of him with my other son, Colin. It's my son who passed away over 6 years ago. In his honor, we donate to causes like the Hoffman Process, Insight Institute, and scholarships to coaching as well. Our goal tonight is $50, so we'd appreciate some love. Just hit that little $sign if you have a question as well. But you're definitely welcome to ask questions of Evan and I at this point. So, okay, you brought up that relationship, and many of my audience knows that I had 2 significant relationships. At that point in my life, though, I was very insecurely attached to that person. And you probably recognize that on a peripheral level. Because of that, and because I was insecurely attached, I was all in that particular case. But I also idolized this person and put them on a pedestal, which made it actually an unhealthy relationship to some degree. Why I'm sharing this is because you mentioned earlier attachment, and I know you're familiar with attachment theory, love attachment theory. I'm going to share with you, I've actually met somebody I'm very interested in. We've been dating for over a month. And it's interesting because she's not activating all of my insecurities. It's fascinating to me. It's almost, Evan, it's almost foreign because it's so calm. It doesn't feel like love. I mean, I'm actually in shock.
Yeah, no, I'm happy for you, and you landed where I did with my wife. I mean, it's the same story. Good relationships are about the absence of anxiety. It's just easy, and you don't have to second guess yourself all the time, and you don't have to put on airs or try to impress or worry about the next thing you're going to do. They're like 2 puzzle pieces fitting. So if that's where you are right now, Jonathan, I'm thrilled for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a little too early to tell, but we're going on our 5th or 6th week now. And it's just shocking to me because I'll be honest with you, I had like complete second thoughts because this wasn't activating me. And I looked at my past experiences believing that was love, was to be activated, to be triggered, to be in anxiety, to be and I also can run the gamut of being both an avoidant and an anxious person sometimes, especially if I'm with an overtly anxious person. So it's just fascinating to me to be in this space, which I know you've been in this. How long you been married now?
Coaching since 2003, married since 2008. So this will be my 17th year.
Wow, congratulations. I know you talk about Bridget quite a bit in your coaching practice. I've always thought that you reference her quite a bit because of how she showed up when you dated. I mean, that's the way I've observed.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with your observation. I mean, there's not really like a conscious thing that I'm doing. If anything, I try to teach people what I've learned, the mistakes I made along the way, and try to reverse engineer that so other people could avoid making some of those same mistakes. So for me, I overvalued people who were like me, and undervalued people who were complementary pieces. And so I spent my whole life looking for the female version of me, not realizing it wasn't really compatible. It was just what I was attracted to. So we have a difference between what I'm most attracted to and what's good for me. And we have to find a point in the Venn diagram where both of those things are taken care of. And if you keep on chasing the thing you're most attracted to, it's probably not going to work out.
By the way, we have a question from Annika, so let's jump in. Oh, by the way, really quickly, Brown Canetta says, Evan, are you in California? I feel the East Coast and Central USA are more apt to marry.
I think you could probably try to do some sort of, I mean, you can chat GPT this, take sort of cultural trends and be like, yeah, people in LA are X, Y, and Z. It's more going to be polyamorous and, situationship. You could play that on some sort of larger scale.
Yeah.
And even if it's true, there's so many exceptions to it that it almost doesn't matter. Do you think there's millions of married people in California? I do. So I'm not going to say your observation is wrong. People are different in different parts of the country, but how many people do you need to be happy for the rest of your life? One. So who cares what the larger cultural trends are? We need one person who agrees with you.
Well, but also if you take the population of California and relate it to the balance of the states that you might be talking about, we still outnumber the amount of people.
Her point is well taken, but and I know these are limiting beliefs, right? So limiting beliefs, something that's partially true, but not totally true. And we could run down limiting beliefs. California culture is not as marriage oriented as Midwest culture. Men my age don't want women their own age. All guys are commitment phobes. Guys are just looking for one thing. People with my body type, and there's just way too many exceptions for them. Like people of my body type. Well, the average woman in America is a size 18, right? And she's married. The average woman in America. So like anytime someone says, here's why it's impossible for me, I'll be like, all right, well, what's the possible version of that? It's not that all the things are silly or untrue. It's that it's only half the story.
Oh, I think I get a kick out of when I'm talking to one woman who's in Los Angeles. I can't meet any men in Los Angeles. I need to be in Dallas. And then you're speaking to a woman in Dallas. I can't meet any men in Dallas. I need to be in Los Angeles. And then the next person.
Every city's the worst city for dating if that's where you are. And I'll ask any woman who calls me from LA or New York, and I'm like, would you like to move to rural suburban Cincinnati? And she'll say no. I'll say, all right, so take the fact that you have a lot more options than most people, and that gives them more choice, but it also gives you more choice.
Yeah. Brown Canetta says, Evan, great observation. I appreciate your commentary. Monica's in the house. Question, what are some other qualities that the relationship has and I can recognize when we attract a secure man? You said no anxiety being one. Oh, this is a good question. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that.
I think one of the things that I've found interesting over time is that as a guy who works with women, I can believe that women are more sensitive and more intuitive than men in general. And women are less likely to listen to their own feelings than men. Now, I don't know if it's biological or sociological, but think of someone who is with a guy for 6 months and he says he loves her, and she knows, even though he loves her and she loves him, that he has anger issues, that he's dismissive of her opinions, that he doesn't know how to handle conflict when she gets upset, right? He escalates things, pulls away. We'll just use that as a small example. And then, even though she feels that way, so she can't speak her mind, she can't be herself, she can't be relaxed, everything can cause a fight, right? And then she stays in that relationship, marries him, has 2 kids with him, stays with him for 25 years.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean about not listening to your feelings. So when we say, well, what are the other things? This is the thing.
Yeah.
Anxiety is the thing. If you're in a relationship with someone and you can't let down your guard, be yourself, what I call in my coursework, feeling safe, heard, and understood. If you have a partner who doesn't make you feel safe, heard, and understood, I don't care how much you love him, how long you've been together, how tall, cute, rich, smart, funny, none of that matters. All that matters are your feelings. And so if you're listening to your feelings, there's no questions to ask, right? It's the relationship is fundamentally easy and worth preserving, and is 2 people are equally bought into it. So usually the problem is people are not listening to their anxiety and acting on it. And acting on it means you're fired.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, it's not, we're going to renegotiate this relationship. You're going to change. I'm going to turn you into the person I want you to be, who I thought you were in the first 3 months we were dating. Next, not my husband, not my husband, not my husband, not my husband. And so if you listen to those feelings, you might be single for longer, but I could promise you're not going to spend years in a dead-end relationship.
Yeah, I'm in 100% agreement. I'm actually curious about something. So when you got married, well, let me reframe that. When you were dating Bridget, or that period of time in your life, were you at a space where you already knew you wanted to find a wife, make babies, raise a family? Were you in that space?
Yeah, and that's so important for your topic when he's talking about how to tell if he's ready to commit. Yeah. There could be great people, great couples who meet at the wrong time in life. Yeah. And just like I said, you could have a guy who is a tantric sex master, top chef, supermodel, Rhodes Scholar. Yeah. But if he doesn't want to commit to you, who cares how great he is? Like none of these things matter. Like, one thing could sink the whole relationship. So one of those things is timing. Yeah. You could find an amazing guy and have an amazing relationship, and he's just got divorced and he's not really on track for the next relationship. So you met him at the wrong time. Maybe you met him in 5 years. That same guy is ready for a commitment now that he's played the field. But right now he's not. So meeting a guy who leads with that, you don't have to talk him into it. You don't have to convince him, right? I met my wife when I was 34, 35 years old. I very much wanted to get married and have kids. If I met her 2 years before, I wasn't in the place in life to be able to build something. My career was not in a good place. 2 years later, she'd be, we got married when she was a month before she turned 39. So she'd have been 41. If I wanted 2 kids, that wouldn't be very practical. So maybe the only time we could have gotten together was when we got together. Yeah. Timing is so important.
Well, speaking of timing, so, and since I mostly speak to a midlife audience, and a significant percentage of your clientele now is in that bracket, I know after my divorce, the last thing I wanted was a significant relationship. And it took me over a decade, really, or even a little bit longer than that, before I knew I even wanted a significant relationship. But I had this interesting awareness that I didn't have for that decade period of time, was that I had to lean into the space that if I wanted a significant relationship, that means also being open or willing or desiring to actually take care of somebody. There's an element of going all in with somebody where you're, and you know, in other words, you want to take care of them, being with someone who also wants to take care of you. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that framework that I just said, to take care of.
I think it's having the emotional capacity to give and not just receive.
Yeah.
I think there's times in our life when we've been beaten down. We don't have anything to give. I talked to a woman, I got a new client today, and she's lovely. And she took care of her elderly parents, and she's still raising teenagers, has sole custody. Yeah. She happens to be a social worker, so she's giving emotionally at work. That's been her default setting her whole life, is to be the caretaker. And it never really occurred to her that if you're in a relationship and every relationship is draining your energy and nothing's ever filling your cup and no one's ever taking care of you, that your life's going to be out of whack. That's just her normal, is putting herself on the line to take care of people. So I let women know, you deserve to have a guy who's taking care of you. If you don't feel taken care of, well, then why are you in the relationship? To say you've got a boyfriend? Yeah. Right? And people put up with this kind of stuff forever. They don't even know that there are better opportunities out there if you exit this opportunity. So there's a feeling, there's an energy exchange, and it doesn't have to be 50-50 at all times. People lean on each other. But if you're always on the losing end of relationships, it's not that you're giving too much. It's that you're giving to the wrong person.
Yeah. Well, coming back to, remember I shared the opening line of my dating profile. Imagine we just got out of a personal development workshop. My second line was, I want to get remarried. Like, I've actually made that choice that I want that level of commitment. And I'm sure you say the same thing to your clientele. You know, when a man in particular, coming back to this title, how to tell if he's ready for commitment, when he starts by saying, I want something casual, you know, I think it's important to actually identify what that might mean to a person. But ultimately, and I'm saying this because I'm in that space of wanting serious, whereas I wasn't there 10 years ago, but I'm certainly there today.
Yeah. It sounds more like a statement than a question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I just want your perception on that then.
Yeah, I mean, from a marketing standpoint, it's certainly a differentiator to say I want to get married. I don't know I would do that with the limited real estate, but it's not bad. It's just,
well, this is Match.com, plenty of real estate.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, I think it's refreshing, and I think there's a lot of people who do want that, and we're almost even afraid to want it. We're afraid to admit it. I've got clients who are afraid to admit that they want love, that they want commitment, that they want marriage. Somehow it's a sign of weakness, or you're turning in your feminist card, and none of that is true. We're a relational species. I'll often ask people on our calls about their feelings, right? Not surprisingly, we talk about feelings, and a lot of women I work with are really cerebral. They're not really that dialed into their feelings. They could tell you what they want, but they can't really speak to their emotions. And if you dig deep enough and you ask people, what would it feel like if you found your committed partner? And a good 33% of them will say complete. And then as soon as they say complete, they cover their mouth and try to take it back, because it's the thing that they said and it's the thing that they meant, but they have been told by society and their therapists, right? No, you're complete. You don't need someone to complete you. You're complete on your own, and that's fine. That's a good message. But I will tell you this, if my wife were to leave me or to die, I wouldn't feel complete. Yeah. I don't think that's embarrassing at all to admit that. Yeah. So why is it embarrassing to admit that life is meant to be shared, and you can have a happy life alone, and you should have a happy life alone? But there's something more that a lot of people aspire to, and it's nothing to be embarrassed about.
Well, you know, you said something a moment ago, and I want to make an observation, is I've observed both men and women have a really difficult time identifying their feelings, articulating their feelings, and more importantly, asking for what they need out of a relationship. Like that's, and I'm saying this men are poor at this, but women are as equally as poor at this. And I'm curious, because you work with women, do you see this same thing that I see in this area?
I think the hard part is everybody's been so affected by their experience of their past, the ones that they didn't choose with their family, and then the experiences that they carried out and the choices that they made unconsciously in love. And when people, I think this is profound, even though it might be pretty obvious.
Okay.
When people send mixed messages in relationships, it's not that they're bad people. They have mixed feelings. There are people who, at the same time, want to love and be loved and are afraid of being vulnerable, and want the whole commitment, but are afraid of being in another bad marriage. There's lots of people who have mixed emotions, and that's what we bump up against in real life is complicated people with messy lives trying to figure this out and not being completely consistent. And that's the hard part, is we don't always act in accordance with our deepest desires because of fear.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've experienced that both personally, and I witness this habitually. And I think that's one of the reasons why, and at least from the way I promote dating a relationship advice, I'm a big proponent of human beings doing personal development, self-help, spiritual work, therapy to heal their past relationships. And at the demographic that I speak to, which roughly 75% of people over 45 years old are divorced. I mean, divorce can be a very traumatic experience. And just to give you some context, I moved out of the house and was on a dating site the next day. This was 20 years ago, if you will. I mean, I did nothing to work on myself, which happens to be what I observed so frequently. And it's kind of like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. It took me years to really recognize that I was the common denominator in my dating life. I mean, in other words, the problems weren't the women, the problems were me. I'm curious, from your coaching standpoint, how much do you encourage that, doing that healing work? And why do you believe that's so important, if you do?
I think most solutions are both and rather than either or.
Okay.
Meaning I'm pro therapy. I'm not a therapist, but I'm pro therapy. I'm pro personal growth and self-awareness and healing and all that kind of stuff. And that also commonly serves an excuse to not move forward. So people can spend a decade looking inward and not going on one goddamn date.
Okay.
Right. So like, oh, I'm on my own journey, and it's fine, but I went from 50 to 60 and I have nothing but more self-awareness to show for it. So I think these can be done in tandem. And I'm sure you've had this experience, but I've had this experience. Usually people come to me after they've done plenty of therapy. They have decades of therapy, and they're still not in a happy relationship. And what I've discovered is that therapy is about your past, coaching is about your future. And so people who've done a little bit of work could accelerate their future, right, immeasurably by taking action forward instead of spending all their time ruminating about the past. So I'm not anti-therapy. I'm very pro-coaching, though.
Got it. So, all right, so let's shift the conversation. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. How do you encourage, or let me reframe that. I'm trying to think of how I want to articulate this. Like, if you're going to give advice to my audience today on how to spot a commitment ready guy, like first, second, or third date, what do you think stands out most in your mind when it comes to spotting that type of person?
Do you mind if I reframe the question?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Do I have permission?
Oh, yeah, we're friends, of course.
Okay. I think the question feeds into something that I think is wrong with dating.
Okay.
Which is that the term I use in my work, we all have our own terminology, is you're trying to read the last page of the book, right, to see if it has a happy ending.
Yeah.
And the problem is, there isn't even a book. It hasn't been written. If you're trying to figure out on the third date whether someone is your husband.
No, that's not what I said. Commitment ready. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
Because that's making that about that person and you. Because there are some obvious signs of people who aren't ready.
Right. So that's what I'm more focused on.
Okay. Okay.
Right. And that's why I say the framing is different.
Okay.
Right. So I don't know, man. I got to say, if I'm a single guy and I haven't been single in a really long time and I want to get somewhere with a woman, I'm not going to lead with the bad stuff.
Yeah.
It's a performance. And any guy who knows anything knows that, and not every guy's good at the performance, but it's a performance. Yeah. So generally what happens is a guy who's like in his head, hell no, I'm not looking for anything serious. Yeah. He's not going to come out and tell you on the first date, hell no, I'm not looking for something serious. It's not in his interest to do so, and to expect him to do so is silly. And if you ask him point blank, right, which again, also, we talked about this on our podcast where we got into an argument. Asking someone point blank, so what are you looking for? Are you looking for a serious commitment? Is kind of an interview question, and most people don't like it, and everybody also knows the answer. So that's why I pay far more attention to how someone follows up after the date.
Okay.
And how they pace the relationship. The guys who, here's another thing. You should not have to ask a guy, what are you looking for? Because guys who want to get married, talk about it. It's like guys who are in fantasy football leagues, talk about it. Whether you want to hear it or not, they're going to talk about it. So guys will lead if they want to lead. And the absence of him leading, either to taking down his profile or committing to you, or talking about a future, if he's not doing those things, that tells you a lot more than the performative aspects of dating, which most guys are able to work around.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I'm going to share something with you. With this new person that I'm with, speaking of dating profiles, I found myself going through a slight detox period. I got it's become so second nature to swipe that for about, and this is at the point where I've seen this woman now 5 or 6 or 7 times. It was almost, it's like I had to actually deactivate them and hide them because the temptation was so, just palpable. I'll be candid with you. It's like almost an addictive experience to just swipe.
Yeah. It's intended to be. It's a slot machine.
Yeah.
And they give you intermittent rewards that give you dopamine hits. Yeah. And so it's intended to be a slot machine that keekeeps you hooked. Yeah. That's their interest. Their interest is to keep you hooked. Your interest is to figure out how to get off the apps. So if you have a good one who's worth investing in, then you know what to do.
But I'm going to tell you something, Evan. It took radical conscious willpower. And I know you should just say, well, Jonathan, you like this person. It should just be easy. But I'm going to tell you something. It was hard.
I think it's useful for you to say that out loud. I haven't used a dating app because of, they came out after I got married. Yeah. But I think you're serving your audience well by talking about that, because I would guess that that's probably universal. I'm sure a lot of women sort of feel the same way. There's always someone younger, cuter, taller, richer, smarter. It's the temptation, the FOMO is real. And so that's why it makes it that much harder for people to commit to each other. It's not that people are necessarily societally more commitment phobic. It's that we're so aware of the number of options at our fingertips.
Yeah.
It's really different than when you grew up in a small town of 2,000 people and you dated the cheerleader from high school and got married when you were 21. It's just a different ball game where you have everybody in the world at your fingertips.
It's interesting. When I was preparing for our conversation today, I was actually thinking about my marriage, or when I met my now ex-wife. But back then, I was so happy to get a date. And in the sense that, it was completely different environment meeting people. And so I really only dated one person at a time. And it probably only worked out to 3 or 4 people a year back then, and I'm talking 1990.
Yeah.
We're now literally at your fingertip. You could have a different day. Well, I know you talk about once a week, but you could have a person twice a day, at this level. As I said, it was just fascinating to witness the amount of willpower I took to deactivate my profiles. We do have a question from Gigi, so I want to take this. How much of a threat is it if a guy you're seeing is still on the apps? We know 99% of people are dysfunctional. What are your thoughts?
My question or your question?
Well, why don't you take that question?
Let's revise the number to 90% instead of 99%. It's a little more realistic and positive. So let's say 90% of people are not worthy of you, but that leaves 10% to play with. The answer lies in where you are in your short-term relationship journey, right? If a guy is on the apps, we just heard Evan. If you are not boyfriend, girlfriend, you both have the right. The fact is, if you see him on the apps, that means you're on the apps too.
Yeah.
So until both people have come to terms with the fact that, okay, we're doing this, and both people probably shouldn't be doing that unless they've gone out for about a month or 7 or 8 dates. They shouldn't commit to a stranger based on hope, fantasy, projection, and potential. I think it's very normal for someone to be on the apps. If he's on the apps and you've been sleeping with him for 4 months, you should probably end the relationship.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's fascinating to me how many times I'll get a call from a client saying, well, I went to go see if he was online. And again, I'm a big believer, if two people certainly reached a point of physical intimacy, then that should be one of the conversations if you met through this medium, or if one person is using apps and the other person isn't. I think it's good to have those conversations. Lulu has a question. On his profile, he said he's looking for adventure and love to learn from. When we chatted, he said he's looking for the one to die with. Isn't that confusing? Can you explain?
Already did. This is the point.
Yeah.
A, you can't tell anything from a profile. There's too limited information to really be able to extrapolate much. Someone filled that out in about 15 seconds so he could start swiping. So A, probably didn't put too much thought into it. And then B, people contradict themselves all the time. He's probably looking for adventure and someone to die with. And if you ask him on different days, he's going to give you a different answer on different days. Yeah. So that's why you pay attention to how he treats you.
Yeah.
And how you feel. And is he leading towards commitment, taking down your profile, talking about a future, when we get married, when you meet my kids, all those kind of things? Or is he just kind of like, we're good for now and we never talk about anything, which means that he is intentionally not telling you that there is no future. His absence of talking about it is the loudest thing you should hear.
Okay, so I'm curious, when did you start talking to Bridget about a future?
Weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, if you met me when I was 35, and again, it wasn't like needy, it wasn't desperate, but if you're on a date with someone for like 4 hours and you start talking about hopes and dreams and fears, I want to be like my dad. I want to be like a little league coach. I want to have pool parties in my backyard with all the families. Like, I always wanted that. Yeah. You didn't have to pry it out of me.
By the way, Rhonda wants to say, Evan, Marc, Katz, I appreciate your style. Diane says, I appreciate Evan's or EMK's advice. He's practical, mature. He's 100% right on what's effective and successful for women. I just wanted to jump in with that.
Very, very kind of you. And I love the word effective, because sometimes when advice givers give advice, people feel attacked. And it's never about whether you're right or you're wrong. You're not wrong if you disagree with anything that we said tonight. We just hope that the stuff that we share makes you more effective in getting what you want. And sometimes people act in ways that don't get them what they want. That's the rich irony, is people do the best that they can, and all of us sometimes get in our own way.
In fact, I've watched some of your videos and you've emphasized that particular word many a time. So I'm aware you differentiate between right and wrong and effective and ineffective.
People don't like to be attacked. No one wants to be told they're wrong. And even on a micro level in a marriage, you can't say you're wrong, honey.
Yeah.
I hear you. Let's figure out where we could find a point of agreement that we can compromise on. But telling someone they're wrong, they immediately shut down.
I just want to point out, Joan says, Jonathan, it took me 10 years to feel I'm ready for marriage again. I love your advice. Never use dating app. Never use dating apps. Don't want to play dumb games. What to do?
That
You
one's
know,
yours. That one's yours.
yeah, it's funny. So it's interesting. One of the questions I ask on my application on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being, easy, how easy is it for you to get a date? And it's interesting how most every woman puts 8, 9, or 10, like it's rather easy. But when I ask them, when was the last time you went on a first date? It's been like 10 years. Again, I look at my life. I work from home. I mean, I'm at home most of the time. I mean, I go for my walks and I go out a little bit. But I mean, if I'm not putting myself out there like through a dating app, unless some female burglar comes in and wants to rob my place, meeting someone is a challenge, unless you're physically out there. And I can only speak for myself. So again, I believe this is a great, coming back to the online conversation that we had earlier, I still think it's one of the best mediums because it's a great opportunity to meet people you wouldn't otherwise meet in your life. And just for the record, the woman I met, it wasn't a dating app. It was actually through a social media connection. So I look at social media as also part of the online dating, world, the internet world, I should say.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat, and True Lifestyles prefers to meet in real life. We all prefer to meet in real life.
Yeah.
Like there's no argument. The problem is real life. If you're me, and you work in a spare bedroom from your house and you live in the suburbs and everybody's married, if I were suddenly to be divorced, I wouldn't have much real life to draw upon. I mean, I guess I could just start walking around the mall or take up pickleball. But the truth is, real life interactions for most people who work remotely don't just happen. And so that's why it's important to have another strategy to generate opportunity, however flawed the medium of online dating is.
Yeah. By the way, back in October, I started to go to the Center of Spiritual Living, which is kind of we'll call it a metaphysics church, if you will. I first walked in, and I swear to God, the average age of the people there was like oxygen mask. I mean, oxygen tanks,
I'm not surprised in the least.
And I thought this might be and there was younger people there too, but I felt like I went for weeks, not from the intent of meeting someone, but I also did feel like, hey, go to places, go to be in environments where like-minded people would be. Hi. But at the same time, I struggle. Like I'm not the type of person that even walks up to a stranger and says hi. It's just, and maybe because I don't want to intrude on someone's other space. Meeting in real life is even difficult for me because I'm uncomfortable meeting people in real life. Not that I'm not capable, it's just uncomfortable for me.
I get that. I mean, I'm super extroverted and very comfortable meeting people. And I turned to online dating because meeting people in clubs wasn't, in my 20s and 30s, wasn't my forte. I discovered I was better with words, and that's a place where you're more judged on looks. And so I was like, whatever it is that I have works a lot better when I'm doing it online, and I could have the space to be witty or charming or inquisitive or whatever the hell differentiated me from other guys. Real life is challenging for everybody. And so there's a small sliver of people who are really comfortable just talking to strangers and asking for their numbers, but most of them are not the guys that you want.
It's funny. Brown Canetta mentions pickleball. I went to go play, and by the way, I know that's all the rage, especially people over 50. I came this close to twisting my ankle and throwing out my back. And I'm like, you know what? As much fun as it is, I don't want to risk my body for that sport.
So I did it. And you're whatever, 10 years older than I am, but I did it. I joined Calabasas Pickleball Club and played pretty intensely for about a month. And I sprained my forearm and it never came back. It still hurts 4 months later. I figured rest would fix it. I don't even know what the hell to do, but I loved it. I loved it. Not necessarily for social aspect. That was sort of in theory good, but I think it's a lot of fun, and you can be on the court and in your 70s. It was really kind of fun playing with people because it's not a big court.
It is certainly the up and coming sport. Well, it has been now for years now, but certainly for the over 50 crowd. I just knew that I don't want to risk my body because, like you, I'm a little bit competitive, and I would have taken it a little bit too much to the extreme.
Understood.
You know, Evan, we've come up on the hour. And I just want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to pick your brain, have this conversation, share your wisdom with my audience. I mean, you and I are probably the two closest people that do this of the group of people that you and I both know, but outside of, say, Matt or maybe both Matt and Matthew.
Matthew Hussey, Matthew Boggs,
Matthew Boggs, Matthew Hussey. Thankfully, we have original names. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
No, we're kindred spirits.
So, I just noticed. All right, I see, Evan, you did give me something, which is your link that you want to share. So, tell me about what you want to share with my audience.
I just thought, given I haven't even clicked on it to see if it's the right link, but given the tenor of our conversation, and given the tenor of the internet, with we agree that 90% of men are not worth your time, but it's not always easy to tell from their profiles which ones they are. I put together a handy dandy checklist of the 10 guys you absolutely should not date. And so if you go to evanmarckatz.com/10 men, you can download that checklist, be on my mailing list, and hopefully give you free advice.
By the way, now I'm only curious. Do you know one example real quick?
well, I could rattle them off really quickly. I
just want to give me one.
I had one viral TikTok video. This was the viral TikTok video.
Okay.
But something we said before. Here's a better. A guy who doesn't know what he wants. Yeah. A guy who doesn't know, like when you ask a guy, so, do you ever want to get married again? He's like, I don't know. The I don't know guys, you don't want to fall in love with an I don't know guy, because there's a 50-50 chance that 2 years in, when you're thinking like, all right, and he's like, I told you I didn't know. I don't like giving that much power to any strangers. So I stick with people who are very, very clear in their intentions from the beginning, that you share a vision. Now the next 2 years of dating is exploring whether you guys are compatible, but at least you know at the very beginning you want the same things.
I'm in 100% agreement with that. So folks, listen, I want you to, I've posted a link in the show notes for Evan's website. I want you to go there. He has actually an amazing website. It's very well done. Join his mailing list, follow his content, follow his coaching. He's brilliant. I have a great deal of respect for him. Again, I wouldn't have him on if I didn't think he's one of the best in the industry. So my friend, thanks for just jumping on with me and having this chat. I really appreciate you.
Can I take a moment to praise you?
Oh, sure.
Jonathan Aslade is an extremely unusual individual. Really. He's uniquely sensitive, uniquely insightful. You see it how he shows up here in his YouTube videos, and how he's created this community, and how much he gives to women. It's a real template for how to be, and he's really proven to be not just a great dating coach, but a great friend. Most people who are in my industry would see me as competition, would not begin to have me on their show. So the fact that he's got the confidence in himself to showcase me on his show says a lot about him as a human being.
Oh, wow. Thank you, my friend. That really touches me. It means a lot to me. So thank you so much. All right, folks, check us both out based on what Evan just said, because I say, check him out. He's saying, check me out. I appreciate that. Once again, thanks, my friend. And I'm going to say goodnight to everyone, wishing you all a super duper wonderful evening. Be well, and bye now.